One Piece chapter 1134 is here, and I have some thoughts. First of all, the chapter starts off with Luffy doing some sort of leadership gesture and dialogue towards Saul, showing that he's the leader and that he's grateful. I interpret this as him really trying to show Saul honor for how meaningful he was in Robin's life, and it feels odd to me as well as to the crew, where they're like, where did you learn that? And he just continues on, well met, good sir. And of course Saul's heard of Luffy, but really he's just thrilled to see that Robin successfully did find her people. She found true friends who will stand up and protect me. And then you have all the Straw Hats, most of the Straw Hats, looking away saying, we'll protect your life. I'm really glad to find out that Saul and his assistant had planned out this whole greeting with him falling over and them having the same kind of introduction as they did when she was a kid. Because when I first saw this, I was like, when everybody's running around going, what should we do? Saul's falling down. Oh no. And Robin goes, I'll handle it. And it's like, he's just off alone, face down in the water, and everybody's panicking. And I'm like, well, someone could have checked on him. Anyone could have just walked over there and made sure he wasn't drowning. But now to learn that they were all in on it makes me very happy. It adds that kind of extra retrospective layer to the whole thing. So Lilith flies in, introduces herself as Veapunk to Saul, and then we find out what this capsule is that Jinbei brought over on the Sunny. And it turns out that it's Veapunk! I will say this, I really like the explanation that the clone has already been used in the flashback that we saw of Veapunk on Ohara. I don't know why I forgot that name. On Ohara was Veapunk. And the explanation was, don't you think the government would have been suspicious if Stella had left his lab for months at a time? That's such a good point. Why didn't I think about that when we found out how much Veapunk was made to work and how closely he worked with the elders? I didn't even consider this. So that's actually a really good explanation for kind of putting this extra clone that we didn't know about in the story. But then Lilith says she's going to build a laboratory here. She's going to extract the clone Veapunk from this, I don't know, this chamber of sorts, and also fix Kuma. And the line says, Lilith, does that mean you're able to make my daddy all better? And Lilith said yes. So I think the plan is to completely restore Kuma. So I have some thoughts. Y'all know I'm not a fan of fake out deaths. I don't mind them every time, but I don't like how often they're used with certain authors, Oda being one of them. I think it cheapens the story. I've said this many times. The thing about these 3 fake outs that we've had over the last 2 chapters is that each one, I think, has an explanation that is at least semi-satisfying. I think Saul's explanation is probably the least satisfying of the 3, but, you know, it came with such an amazing emotional punch, I didn't really mind it too much. I was willing to let it go. I think Veapunk is next in line for a satisfying reason, because he is the smartest person in the world. He's proven himself over and over again to be able to think several steps ahead and to think his way beyond what anyone else could. We watched it happen with Saturn when he said, hey, I'm a scientist too. You can't outthink me, so do my orders and I will notice if you don't. And yet Veapunk somehow made a clone that apparently Saturn didn't notice, sent it off to do his bidding while he stayed in the lab. And when Saturn said, make me the highest authority, Veapunk said, I'm gonna make someone else the highest authority and I just won't tell you and you probably won't notice. So we've seen Veapunk outthink people a lot. And just in general, any sort of problem that arises, Veapunk says, not with my brain. Plus we had scenes like when we saw his giant, not brain, it wasn't a brain, it was a chopped off head. That still bothers me, being kept in a vat or in the liquid. And the question was, when does a man truly die? All the other Vegapunks have survived, not just Lilith, but even all the ones that we thought were dead. They all just Frankensteined themselves and went off to live their happy lives together. So being able to outthink a situation, the fact that the head was still being preserved, and it works. I think that there's enough of a trail there that it's clear that this is what Oda's plan was. This isn't something that he just randomly came up with. This is clear what he was doing. It's not my favorite, mostly because all of the Vegapunks have survived. I mean, the body of the Stella is dead. I mean, heart stopped beating, gone, stabbed through 2 times, he's gone. But because his brain is still alive, and now we have a clone that we can just, I assume, match those 2 things up. It's not the most satisfying thing in the world, but I don't think it's terrible. The Kuma one is actually the one that I think is the best, because this one I think has been signposted way more than even Vegapunk was. The fact that Bonnie introduced the explanation of what happened to Kuma way early on before we got all the details. Bonnie introduced it by saying, they took my dad and they turned him into an unthinking weapon. She said they took away his humanity. And then in the very next chapter, when we're first introduced to Vegapunk, Lilith says, why is it impossible to control the will of living creatures? So right out the gate, from the very beginning of Egghead, we're shown that Kuma they've tried to take away his humanity, they tried to take away his will, and then we're immediately told, no, that's impossible. So for the entire arc, throughout this entire arc, when tons of people have been calling Kuma dead, I've been saying, no, he's not dead! It was told us from the very beginning of the story that he is not dead. They can't completely get rid of his will. And then that was perfectly displayed for us when we go through Kuma's whole backstory, and then we watch the flip get switched, and we see his consciousness as he is going over all his memories all this time that he's been running. We see it all go through, and then he gets turned into what they tried to make him into. But then very quickly after we get all of that explanation, we watch his will overpower the programming. We see him come and save his daughter despite every odd. Even Vegapunk was surprised at that, because Vegapunk still doesn't understand how humanity could usurp science. I could go on, honestly, because this was something that I think was made extremely clear, and I personally expected Kuma to either be restored by Vegapunk on Egghead or killed in his great sacrifice, because sacrifice was also a huge theme in Egghead. The fact that he wasn't killed in Egghead and they carried him off, it was obvious to me that we were going to do something to restore him, because the signposts were there from the very beginning, and because why in the world would we carry his body off only to then kill him 10 chapters later in the most anticlimactic way possible? If we carried him off of Egghead, then he's gonna be restored. Now again, I have to go back to this. I feel like I've been talking about this for so long, but I think this is important. Again, Bonnie says, Lilith, does it mean that you'll be able to make my daddy all better? Now that's the thing that I take ire with. All better? I don't think he should be all better. And I'm holding out. I'm not throwing a fit right now. Because we're going to see how it goes. But if he's just completely restored and there's no consequence to anything that happened to him over the last... How long has he been down? He's been a cyborg for like 2.5 years? Right? Because he was a cyborg before the time skip. Right? No. No, he wasn't yet. No. He didn't have his consciousness removed yet. No! It's been way less time. It's been like a few months. Yeah, so if we erase everything, then I think that that's cheap. But if we, restore his consciousness, if we undo the programming and his will is back, but he still, can't smile, can't emote, or we can't completely undo the programming, but we can mostly undo it. Like if there's still some friction there, some tension there, then I'm happy with this, because I think that this was, like, the path was lit up with lights, that this was obviously the direction we were going with if he was not dying on Egghead. So why am I still yapping? Because the fact that we had 3 of these reveals in 2 chapters, this is my ire. My ire isn't that fake out deaths are always terrible. I don't think there are. I think that there is an at least acceptable explanation for all 3 of these. It's just the frequency in which it's done in the story at large, and then to have all three of these so close together is a little bit just eye-rolly. So anyway, I'm gonna see how Kuma and Vegapunk play out, because I try not to be too reactionary over concepts that are introduced and wait for the execution to decide if I'm, you know, gonna be a brat or not. But in the meantime, since we're all at this point in time, I'm curious, of these three that we've just been introduced to, what is the one that you excuse the most easily, and what is the one that you're kind of side-eyeing the most? For me, I excuse Kuma the easiest because of all the reasons that I gave, and I side-eye the books the most. Because it says that they saved all of them! They scoured the entire island and got them all! So they were just all waterproof and bomb-proof, I guess. Anyway, Elbaf might be my favorite arc visually so far, with all the waterfalls and everything being very nature focused and in a tree or many trees. The architecture all around is all gorgeous, but now that we've seen this library and the school, I love it so much. And actually, this is the final week that T-Scene is out. She's going to continue with us in January. So we have Chirag again this week, and he focused on the Walrus School in his art piece. And between the swings and the pulley systems, the different, I assume those are classrooms that are hanging down, and you have like these little windows out, the kids splashing in the water. It's so beautiful. It seems like every new angle that we get of Elbaf, every new place that we go to, it's just so storytale-esque. It's so picturesque. I feel like this Walrus School, I want to be attending it. It's so beautiful around every corner. And something that's super interesting here is the way that they have left a lot of their past culture that they used to be identified by, that they used to thrive in, that these things are not only left behind, but seem to be almost snuffed out is maybe a little bit too harsh, but to the point where even small things like calling the humans pipsqueak, calling the kids brats, like even just very mild, we'll say mild forms of verbal violence is like, no, don't say that. No, we don't do that. No, stop it. Like it's almost aggressively, we're behind us with our warrior days. We're not warriors, we're not fighters, we're not even a little bit mean. It is interesting to be introduced to Ripley because she's one of the last of the warrior giant generation before some big cultural shift happened to them. And she seems to not fully have gotten used to the new way of things, still saying stuff that isn't considered okay anymore, but also going along with this narrative of, yeah, we're not about that anymore. She said, insults, violence, pillaging, war, that's just not the world we live in anymore. And this is when we learn about what actually happened to King Harold, or at least we're getting this version of what actually happened. So the great King Harold once said, don't fight other countries, trade with them, which is exactly what Mother Carmel tried to introduce to them. Do you remember when she came into Elbaf and tried to convince them to trade instead of to be warriors? And they were like, that seems a little bit extreme. Let's calm down a little bit. This was her message. She said, he got into many arguments with the village chiefs and their traditions. He was a great king who tried to reform this country and was killed by his own son before his dreams could be realized. But the country refused to give the son the throne, and so Elbaf has no king now. Okay, first of all, good on them. If you have a great king who is noble and honorable and you love him, and then his son, you know, kills him by the look of the throne in the throne room that we see in a little bit. There's a good hunk cut out of that throne. So if his son assassinates him and then says, hello, I am your new king, you know, you would think that the country would say, no. So good for them on that, but I also think that I don't think this is real. Mostly because those are Mother Carmel's words, and so I'm naturally suspicious of them. It makes me think because Mother Carmel on the surface was very loving and kind, and all her children felt very loved by her, and it was this beautiful home and family, and then, you know, she was a child trafficker. And then she went into Elbaf and she promotes this new order that Elbafians, that the Elbaf warriors were like, no, we're not about that. But then this king adopted it. And I don't know, it could be a stretch, but it seems like a signal to us that he too, if he was adopting Mother Carmel's words, that he too was only a loving king on the surface, and maybe Loki saw that the king was trying to snuff out their culture and maybe even leave them vulnerable by giving them generations of not being warriors, and not even that they're just not warriors, like they're not going out into the world and pillaging, but that we're not even fighters anymore. We won't even say something slightly mean anymore, even something slightly insulting. We gotta snuff that out real quick. It seems like the culture that was once known for being warriors and fighters and no one would mess with them are now being weakened to the point that they would be left extremely vulnerable. And maybe Loki saw what his dad was trying to do and wanted to fight for them and wanted to keep their culture as well as their defense. If that's true, then it would completely make sense to me why Luffy would have made some sort of deal with Loki that we still don't know what it is. We get confirmation once again that Luffy's Gear 5th form is very reminiscent of a warrior from Elbaf's mythology. And then we see the library, and it's so beautiful. Once again, I love everything about the way Elbaf looks. So, as I said, they saved every book. We'll move on. The interesting thing is when they enter into the library, the books gigantify. My thought about this is I expect this to be a devil fruit because I don't think that Oda would just say because magic. So I expect that this is devil fruit. My theory right now is maybe the owl. Maybe the owl's devil fruit is that it gigantifies everything that comes into its vicinity, because the owl is giant, and if it's an owl in charge of a library, it's probably an owl that loves knowledge and intellect that would fit in with certain fantasy tropes. So maybe its devil fruit is that every one that comes within a certain range, everything, all books would match its size so that it could always have knowledge. Nothing would be out of the owl's reach. That's my just, throwing something out there guess right now, because I do think that there's going to be an explanation for this book thing and it's not just going to be nebulous magic. But focusing in on the emotion of this scene, I love how excited Saul is to finally show Robin the books that he preserved for the sake of O'Hara and the scholars, but also in the dream of someday being able to show this to Robin. And now we're here. Now this is it. This is Saul actually getting to show her. And the look on her face, the tears in her eyes, the blush on her cheeks, this is her dream finally being realized. Anyway, final scene here is with Loki and his transponder snail speaking to seemingly, I guess I'm going with the Shanks evil twin theory. I mean, it seems like it might be true. Loki asked the person that he's on the phone with, "Are you still traumatized by that experience you were telling me about?" And the person on the phone says, "I am, even now. The memory makes me terribly tremble uncontrollably." And Loki says, "It hurts me to hear it too. I've never met or seen you, but through some twist of fate, we've long been friends." And then Loki goes on to say, if it were me, I would level the place for you. So here Loki is really posturing himself as someone who takes care of business when someone is wronging somebody else, which I think still fits in with the idea of King Harold not being who he seems on the surface and Loki stepping in because of the injustice. You put them down for good or they'll come back for vengeance. So clearly he's able to just take care of situations where he thinks someone is in the wrong. The reason I say that I am willing to accept the evil twin theory is because he's calling him Shaggy and the fandom calls evil twin Shanks, what do they call him, like Shiv and Banks, or like, I don't know, like there's so many goofy names, and it seems like Shaggy is maybe this character's name. It's possible Shaggy could be the character that doesn't look like Shanks that arrived alongside of Shanks 2.0, so we'll just have to see, but it just fits so well with what the fandom has been doing that it makes me feel like that might be true. I don't have any better theories. I mean, it is possible that this is just Shanks, that he's just shown up. But if we really do have a twin brother, first of all, I doubt the twin brother is actually evil if he's teaming up with Loki, because right now I don't think that Loki is evil, or at least not like in the black and white sense. But anyway, if Shanks has a twin brother, that could explain why Loki has a grudge against the real Shanks, the Shanks that we know and love, because if there's a twin that Loki is really loyal to, and then there's bad blood between Shaggy and Shanks, then Loki is naturally going to be pretty disparaging about Shanks. He's going to team up with his good friend who's been a comfort to him and a companion to him while he's been in isolation. But regardless, Loki has an image to uphold, and calling him kind, oh, that'll make him kill his friend. Anyway, the chapter ended on a streak of black coming from the sky, just like it did for the elders when they had their summoning circles. We have a close-up of another summoning circle, but not with a number on it, instead with, it seems like, 2 indentations and some markings. And Shanks and someone else with bandages around the face, and maybe like, is that like the bottom of a helmet piece? So these two have arrived. Apparently summoning circles are not exclusive to the elders. Apparently even the God Knights can do it, or assuming that that's that they are God Knights. So that's a huge deal. This is also the panel where I was pointing out the giant cut through the throne, because, you know, that throne has been damaged. It is also possible that Loki was talking to this other character, this, I assume, female character that's arrived alongside Shanks looking character, so it could be either one. I'm curious if this is going to be another member of the Garling family, or if this is going to be someone that we've never met and we don't have any sort of attachment to. There's a lot of opportunities here for what this all could be, but the main focus here is that we have Elbaf celebrating, we have Robin reuniting and potentially she's about to fulfill her dream. We have all this wonderful stuff going on around us, and then now we have, actually, people have entered Elbaf. And I do think it's interesting that the threat that's entered Elbaf, that will likely free Loki, that will likely cause a lot of trouble, this has all happened in the same chapter that we've been shown that Elbaf is no longer a nation of warriors at all. That the warrior generation is on its last leg, and all the generations beneath are not even close to that. So it is interesting to introduce that side of Elbaf social dynamic, and then immediately show that something is here, and they're not gonna have a lot of opposition other than the Straw Hats and Saul and, you know, Dorian Brockie and, you know, the obvious ones. But we're not on an island of warriors anymore, and I think that's fascinating. Also a real bummer for Usopp. What did you think about the chapter? I know this chapter review was longer than normal. I had a lot to say about this chapter, but I'm really excited to talk with you about it more. So please do chat with me. Is there anything that I missed that you want to talk about? Is there anything I said that you think is outlandish and you would like to yell at me about? Please do chat with me more in the comments. I would love to continue discussing it. I will see you again soon. Bye.